This is Newsroom. Hello and welcome from Johannesburg in South Africa. My name is Eben Jansen. The show is live and broadcast from our studios in Auckland Park. We're also streaming live on YouTube as we speak, really, with our entire show then available on our YouTube channel all of the time. Last week, the country was shocked at the news of an East Rand man who allegedly abused and held captive his wife and 5 children for years. We look at that and at a cartoon that also caused the stir last week. And then there's the story of a cancer survivor a little bit later who's hoping to be heading to the Olympics. First, though, our top stories. A bombing at a football match in Adamawa State killed at least 40 people yesterday in an area previously attacked by Boko Haram insurgents in Nigeria. A police officer and nurse said this. The blast hit the town of Mubi in Adamawa State, close to the border with Cameroon. Adamawa is one of 3 states that have been placed under emergency rule because of an insurgency waged by Islamist Boko Haram militants. The Labour Court in Johannesburg is expected to pass judgment today on an urgent interdict that was brought by the AMCU union against Anglo-American Platinum and Impala Platinum. AMCU wants the 2 companies to stop sending pay offers directly to striking miners. The union's members on the Platinum Belt have been on strike since January, demanding a basic salary of 12,500 rand. Test results from the water that's caused widespread diarrhea in the northwest town of Plymouth are expected today. The national government has stepped in to resolve the crisis, and Water and Sanitation Minister Nomvula Mokonyane visited the area at the weekend. Now, last week, the country was shocked at the news of an East Rand man who allegedly abused and held captive his wife and 5 children for years. Dubbed South Africa's own Yusuf Fritzl, he reportedly tortured his children with an electric cable and blowtorch. They also never left the house and have never been to school. He also allegedly kept his wife as a sex slave. We are joined by Vizette Boertes from Tshwane Child Welfare this morning. Thank you for joining us, Vizette. Good morning.
Good morning, Eben, and good morning to all your viewers.
I know you've followed this story quite closely. Just give us your reaction to what's happened and what's the latest developments in this story, really.
Well, this is definitely an unfolding story, and we'll be hearing a lot about this in all of the months to come, because it's so complex and it's very, very shocking. I think the whole situation where the community, the neighbours, everybody had a role to play in keeping this secret. And what we've been seeing over the weekend's reports is that where we at least initially thought that this family had been hidden away and nobody knew about them, there has several people that has come forward that had said that they had known about the children, that they had known about their circumstances, but due to fear of and intimidation had never reported anything.
Is this a reflection of South Africa as a country, that we never meddle in people's affairs, especially our neighbours, and we're sometimes a little bit detached from our neighbours, that this kind of thing can happen under people's noses, really, in South Africa?
Yeah, I think there's an African proverb that says it takes a village to raise a child, and if you could imagine how many eyes there would be in a village, this has definitely not happened in this case. And there's a mix between, I think, a symptom of the South African society, but there's also very personal influences and very specific circumstances that is at play in this case. I think that we are working here with an individual who really does not fit the norm in terms of what is expected of an adult and of a parent who is able to respond to the needs of their children. Maybe the situation with the mother is also under review, but I really think that my main concern is that a person, one man, could influence so many other people to keep such a big secret, that this could carry on for such a long time.
This case particularly, in your experience, have you ever come across anything like this?
You know what? People never cease to amaze me, and all the kind of things that they can get up to is really sometimes very, very worrying. But in this case, I think there's multitudes of layers of things that is just really so shocking. I've worked with very difficult and complex cases before, but I think the scale, with being 5 children involved, at least working of a situation of 16 years of review, that we will have to go back and look and see what has happened to every one of these children, that really takes it to a different level, and there will be a lot of resources and expertise involved in actually unpacking this case over the next few months.
Now, Vizette, the perpetrator has not been named in this case yet for obvious reasons, because there are children involved and the like. But
Yes.
just tell us, what does the psychological profile of this kind of criminal really look like?
Yes. At the moment, it's really just speculation, and I must also say that I'm a social worker, so I can just come from that perspective. But if we look also at Fritzl that you've mentioned, and the incident in America where those 3 ladies was also abducted and kept captive for a really long time, we're working with an individual that potentially really has the personality structure that really uses control, dominance, and threats and fear and physical violence to subdue and build relationships. So we don't have somebody here that seems to be able to build relationships within a normal framework, but that uses this very, very difficult set of circumstances to really subdue and dominate people in his world. And this kind of behavior is really, really frightening and very, very dangerous, especially very dangerous for children. I think if we are going to see the formal psychological evaluations, we might be really looking at some other form of serious psychopathology that is at play here.
Now, this person, the people that know him, they say he's a man that's always friendly and a gentleman in public. Is this kind of behavior normal for this kind of perpetrator?
If you look at Fritzl, and if you look also at the American example, both these men had lived separate lives, hidden lives, public lives to a certain extent, and this private dark side of them really were never revealed. What we can also say at the moment is, if we're looking at the newspaper articles over the weekend, is that lots of people has actually come forward and say that he was really not such a nice guy, that he used threats and intimidation, that he had, assaulted adults to the point where they really are intimidated by him, where they were not willing to actually cross him in any way. So I think there might be a form of duality here at play, or where his behavior in some certain circumstances could be seen as pleasant or functional. Maybe the best word is to use as functional. Maybe a person with this level of manipulative behavior can adapt their presentation of their persona to solicit the right response from somebody which they need to get something from.
Vizette, the question on social media that's popped up over the weekend is that people are asking the victims, why did they never try to escape in this case for all these years?
That is a very, very difficult answer, or question to answer. We have to go look much more in depth in what really happened there. To what level was the control exerted over them? It seems that there were physical barriers where the children and the wife, at certain times at least, were really controlled and were not able to leave the premises. This would always make it difficult for any child to get out if there's physical barriers. But also, when you're talking about psychological barriers, if you are living in a situation where threats are not just made idly, when you are really beaten to a pulp if you transgress even in the smallest way, you would never really think about running away.
Yeah.
And I think it was exceptional bravery of this young boy who actually just really broke open the case, and got help to his whole family. That took incredible bravery, and I think that what we see there is just his drive to survive. Almost a primal drive in that situation.
Vizette, you got 40 seconds to tell us now what happens to the children and the wife, for that matter now, and how do you recover from something like this?
Okay. Recovery is a very long process, and there will be lots of resources needed. And I would urge the public to come forward to offer resources to these children, because they really have nothing at this moment. But also to think of what they'll be faced with is lots of medical examinations to make sure, just to the extent of their injuries, psychological evaluations, and also a lot of evidence gathering in terms of their statements, in terms of the medical review of their bodies to see what kind of injuries they've sustained. And then the long and arduous process would start for them to start to rebuild their lives, especially with the lack of education, lack of stimulation that a lot of them had received. But I never really think that a situation is completely hopeless. So I would really wish all these children the best and really encourage them to see that there is light and that there is hope. They've come free. They are free now.
Lizette, thank you very much this morning. Thank you for joining us. Of course, a very interesting story this is. Last week, the country was shocked. The news that an East Rand man who allegedly abused and held captive his wife and children for many, many years. There are many instances like this around the world, not just here in South Africa. Our producer, Neen Dormel, has put together a timeline of some of these. Thank you, Neen.
Thank you, Eben. In recent years, we've seen a number of kidnapping cases from across the world. Let's just take a look at that. Back in the 1980s in America, the serial rapist John Jamalski held a number of women captive in a concrete bunker beneath the yard of his home in New York. Each rape he prefaced with a Bible study. Now to Austria, where Joseph Fritzl, who was arrested in 2008, held his own daughter prisoner and beat her. He also fathered 7 children with her over a period that lasted nearly a quarter of a century. Then we remember that just last year, Ariel Castro was charged with the kidnapping and raping of 3 women over roughly 10 years. He later hanged himself in a prison cell. And now this similar case has hit home with the Springs businessman who was arrested last month after police discovered he had kept his 5 children aged between 2 and 16 and their mother captive in their house for years.
Nina, I wanted to ask you before I let you go, that's interesting to see how these things develop, but the identity of this man, it's not known yet. Do we have an idea when the man's identity will be known? And also give us an update as to what people are talking about, in this case, on social media.
Not at this stage, Eben. I mean, all we have at this stage is that he is a man in his 30s, a businessman from Springs, and he's known to the community. So they want to keep the children safe. So in order to do that, they have not really made his identity known yet.
And on social media, I'm sure people have been outraged over the weekend, for the last week, really. Definitely.
They've been very outraged from across the country. We see them using the hashtag Springs Monster.
Yeah.
All right. The media has also dubbed this house the House of Horrors. And what people are saying on social media is that they don't just want the father to pay for what he's done. They're also asking why the community never did anything or never noticed anything. And there we see some of those tweets, you know, of them using hashtag Spring Monster and asking these questions.
Yeah, Liesl Pretoria says, scarier than monsters, people who see abuse and do nothing. Woman saw Springs Monster hit wife. Bruises on kids kept quiet. Why is the question? Liesl, that's a question that the whole of South Africa is asking. Charmaine Vessel says, really? Public? First read, then question. If you did this, wouldn't need posting. Didn't school notice kids were absent for long? I don't think these kids ever went to school, Charmaine. It's one of those very, very difficult ones. Well, thank you very much, Janine. Thanks for that contribution. Puts this horrific story really into context. But let's take a look at what's on the front pages around the world, of course. On the African continent, Nigerian papers this morning are reporting on that bomb blast at a football match, in the northeast of that country, killing at least 40 people yesterday. That's from the Vanguard in Nigeria. Of course, in the US papers, all reporting on the Afghanistan soldier that's been released following a swap for 5 Guantanamo Bay terrorism detainees. The decision has been met with stirring criticism and sharp debate all around the US. American President Barack Obama announced the release of Sergeant Bo Bergdahl over the weekend. His mother, Janie Bergdahl, wrote a letter to her son who's receiving treatment in hospital. She read that letter to him via video message. This comes off YouTube. Take a look.
Right now, so many people are in place to assist you in all the aspects of your recovery to full health. Trust them. It's okay. And give yourself all of the time you need to recover and decompress. There is no hurry. You have your life ahead of you. We continue in our minute-by-minute prayers for you as you go through this healing process, and we praise God for your freedom. I think you may be very surprised at the number of people who have gathered you into their hearts, at home in the Valley, here all over Idaho, across the country, and around the world. You have a very amazing support system among all of these people. I'm so looking forward to seeing your face after these last 5.5 years. Long, long years. And to giving you a great big bear hug and holding you in my arms again, never wanting to let you go.
Stirring stuff, really. You can get all of the detail. SABC Newsroom on Facebook, that's where our page is at, and that's where you can get all the detail on that story and all the other stories that are not really in the news if you see the links on the show. You're watching Newsroom on SABC News. We'll be back shortly.
Please take note, as of the 2nd of June, Business Review will broadcast weekdays at 6 p.m., followed by primetime news at 6:30 p.m. The Indigenous language bulletins will remain in their usual time slot, followed by the news at 8 from 8 to 8:30 p.m. Stay tuned to SABC News Channel. All news, all global, all the time.
Welcome back. This is Newsroom on SABC News. Prime Media has vowed to do an introspection following a war of words with the ANC over a cartoon last week. Social media was abuzz on Friday after the cartoon titled Congress of Clowns and the Clowns Who Voted for Them was published by the Prime Media Group. Eyewitness used and sent temperatures rising. Many described it as containing racial undertones and in extremely bad taste. The cartoon was posted on EWN's website and depicted newly appointed ministers as clowns with big rigged noses. The ANC held a peaceful march to the offices of Prime Media on Friday morning. There you see the cartoon with all the ministers as clowns and the voters seemingly called stupid, I think. Now, Stembiso Sitoli from the SABC News digital team was at this march. Good morning, Stembiso. Thanks for joining us.
How are you?
You covered this march. Just give us a quick insight as to, firstly, what happened on Friday at the march. It looked like temperatures were soaring a little bit there, but what were the parties so upset and concerned about?
Well, last week, EWN, as you mentioned, published the, a cartoon, as you mentioned, and basically what was happening, the ANC, they felt like that the cartoon was insulting to voters and to the ruling party. About close estimated 50 people rather, who were there in the march. Basically, what was happening there, they were expressing their views, simply saying that they're not happy with the cartoon and they wish that Prime Media should actually remove it, of which they did. And then, the new spokesperson of the ANC, Zizi Goto, was actually saying it's undermining the South Africans' right and it shouldn't really take place, and that they hope that they won't come back to Prime Media to address the same issue.
Now, tell us about the march. Here we have pictures of what happened.
Well, these are different
the
people coming from different provinces in the country, and basically they were expressing their views that they cannot allow their party to be insulted as it was previously. As we all know that City Press also had a portrait of the president, and this is not the first incident. It has been happening. Basically, at Prime Media, the security was tight there, of course, just to ensure that everything was on point. There's no violence, and it's one of those, Eben.
We've seen this kind of thing before in South Africa. Just tell us a little bit about the reaction from the various parties. Let's start with Prime Media, and then maybe move our attentions to some of the other stakeholders. Well,
the CEO of Prime Media, Mr. Roger, spoke to the ANC outside there, telling them that they are fully aware of the matter, and he simply said this shows how people love the ANC, but at the same time, they have a right to freedom of expression. And Zizi Goto was stating that this should be the aim of of this march, a picket rather, was to indicate to other media houses that you need to know where to cross the line, and not to cross it. Basically, they will be monitoring the situation, and they're hoping that it won't happen. And of course, people on Twitter, the people who have been reacting towards the issue, and there are those who feel like the media is being told what to do, not to do, for the fact that in other publications they removed the portrait and the cartoons. Does this mean it will be happening in future? Do we have the freedom of expression?
I just want to let it be known that we tried to get Prime Media in this morning. Katie Ketapodis, unfortunately, she's too busy, Yusuf, to come here this morning. Maybe you could have come and visited us today to give us your views, but unfortunately it seems as if you guys are working very hard there at Prime Media and you couldn't join us this morning. Stembuso, now they've admitted somewhat that they're in the wrong in this scenario, and apologized and all that sort of stuff that followed on from it. What happens now?
Well, Prime Media, the CEO, Mr. Roger, made it clear that they will they'll take the matter to their own ombudsman internally and deal with it. And the ANC has made it clear that they won't be taking any illegal action. They will leave it with Prime Media to deal with the matter. Another point that I think with this cartoon thing that I'd like us to discuss a bit is when, the question would be who keeps such things, when do we draw the line? Do cartoonists work on their own? Do the editor see the cartoon when it's on the newspaper? Who decides what should go there, what should not go on the publication? And
what was their official response then from Prime Media? They said it was a mistake or an honest mistake?
Well, basically, in the statement, what they're stating was that, also with the cartoon, they released a statement. The cartoon was simply saying they were surprised. The cartoonist, Mr. Jack, Dr. Jack, they were surprised that it got the reaction that it got. They were not expecting it. And they've been working with Prime Media for a long time in terms of cartoons. They've just apologized, and of course, they removed that cartoon on their website.
Now, I don't know the truth of this, but I heard that some members are preparing legal steps over the weekend, despite the apologies being accepted. Members in their private capacity will now go out and take legal steps against Prime Media. Do you have any news on that?
Well, I've heard about that, but of course it's still dodgy. We don't have full details in terms of who they are, but we'll be closely monitoring the situation and reporting on it as it unfolds.
What do you think the world has learned from this process? You've been at the march, you saw the mood. Yeah. What have we learned about where South Africa is now from this?
I think South Africa, in terms of the media and freedom of expression, we still have a long way to go. And most people, the question would be, are we free in terms of expressing ourselves? And I think at this point in time, there are South Africans who believe that we are on the right track. And of course, there are those who simply say, no, we are restricted by a certain party who comes in and tell us what to do, what not to publish.
Yeah, it's an interesting time in the media. Let's, you have much more views, many more platforms these days where you can express your views. Let's just have a look back at what some people thought about this offensive cartoon, as it were. Can we have a look at some of those comments? Again, there we have non-racial South Africa in our lifetime. ANC members picketing, stop undermining voters. That's from the ANC info feed. There you have the cartoon up on social media. Alex Molteno says, this is the EWN cartoon that the ANC is in a froth over. What do you think? Yes, what do you think? Give us your views. We'll have a look at it. Down with racism. We are here as voters of the ANC. We represent millions of South Africans who voted ANC. That was Zizi Kodwa. And then Tendani says, down with racism. We are here as the voters we represent millions of South Africans who voted for the ANC. Rafaelware says, ANC counted them to turn this cartoon issue into a racial issue, to divert people for the real issues. And then Simpiwe Mokele says, why are the ANC folks protesting at Prime Media? Because of that cartoon? Hi, man. That is your views, Simpiwe, but some people are deeply hurt by it. Definitely. And some people believe that their rights have been infringed. Others are even saying that this is racist and has racial undertones. What do you think? At SABC Newsroom, that's where we want you to send us your comments. If they are really good or pertinent, we'll put them up. Stembise Sitola, thank you for joining us and giving us a unique insight into the story that's been bubbling under the surface a little bit.
Thank you very much, Eben. We'll be monitoring the situation.
Thank you. Have you ever wondered how quickly data is generated on the internet? Bet your guess won't even be close to the real thing. Let's take a look at the internet in real time. Scary stuff. As it now stands, in the last 30 seconds, more than 35,000 Twitter accounts have been created. More than 14 million Google searches and more than 75,000 YouTube videos have been watched. That is how much traffic is going on. That's how much we live in the online space now. Go have a look after the show on our Facebook page to see just how much data was generated in only the last 40 minutes. Speaking of our Facebook page, let's have a look at what's happening on Facebook at the moment. The Labour Court in Johannesburg is expected to pass judgment on an urgent interdicte that was brought by AMCU to prevent AMPLATs and IMPLATs from communicating wage settlement offers to mine workers. Go read more on this story on our Facebook page. Then the economic freedom fighters will continue to wear their trademark red overalls to all key parliamentary events. That's according to their leader, Julius Malema. That story and more on our Facebook page. Then there's just something about a man that can dance no matter what size he comes in. What do you think of this video? You know, YouTube clip of the day, we took a look at the lighter side, one of the most popular videos on all online platforms the last week.
That's just wrong.
There's hope for all of us in all shapes and all sizes. Hope you're having a beautiful Monday. Newsroom will be back after a short break.
Africa is symbolized by these magnificent trees. The Sunland Big Baobab is carbon dated to be around 1,600 years old. When baobabs become 1,000 years old, they begin to hollow inside. In the Big Baobab, this has resulted in the world-famous Baobab Tree Bar.
That's Kaleidoscope, Sundays 5:30 p.m. on SABC News.
Welcome back. You're watching Newsroom on SABC News. Let's just take a look at our top stories. A bombing at a football pitch in Nigeria's state of Adamawa killed at least 40 people yesterday in an area previously attacked by Boko Haram insurgents. A police officer and nurse said the blast hit the town of Mubi in Adamawa State, close to the border with Cameroon. Adamawa is one of 3 states that have been placed under emergency rule because of an insurgency waged by Islamist Boko Haram militants there. The Labour Court in Johannesburg is expected to pass judgment today on an urgent interdict that was brought by the AMCU union against Anglo-American Platinum and Impala Platinum. AMCU wants the 2 companies to stop sending pay offers directly to striking miners. The union's members on the Platinum Belt have been on strike since January, demanding a basic salary of 12,500 rands. And test results from the water that's caused widespread diarrhea in the northwest town of Plymouth are expected today. The national government has stepped in to resolve the crisis, and Water and Sanitation Minister Nomvula Mogonyane visited the area at the weekend. And in sport, Bafana coach Gordon Iggesund will only know his fate late this afternoon. SAFA's national executive appointed a 6-member committee to meet Iggesund to discuss whether he goes or keeps his job. SAFA is also in the process of appointing a technical director who will work closely with the national coach. Now, here at Newsroom, we aim to create awareness around the carnage on our country's roads, not only during the peak time periods like December or Easter holidays, but also the remaining 11 months of the year. Every month, we look at what's been happening on our roads, as well as what's been making headlines in the traffic and transport sector. We also take a look at the carnage counter, an initiative set up by Fatal Moves and the Justice Project of South Africa. Joining us for the discussion is the chairman of the Justice Project in South Africa, Howard Dembowski. Welcome back, Howard. Nice to see you once again.
Thanks, Eben. Nice to see you too.
Has things improved since we spoke the last time?
Same old, same old. Unfortunately, we still see an average of 43 people dying a day on our roads. Nothing's changing. It's continuing.
Is that after the holidays we've had? Is the number up a little bit? The average has gone up. We've got a lot of holidays that's just passed us. I'm sure that it's been a mess again.
Well, we're heading towards the peak period of the year for fatalities, and that's July. It's not at Easter, it's not at Christmas, it's in July. So we're heading towards that again. Unfortunately, it just carries on unabated, and there are good reasons for it, not least of which is the way that we treat each other on our roads. Everybody seems to think that they have exclusive use of that road, and everybody else must just get out of their way.
Now, a big issue in the papers the last week or so has been the bribery or how easy it is to bribe metro cops in South Africa. At the Justice Project, what is your view on this problem?
Well, it's a very unfortunate and very difficult problem to deal with. The reason for it is very simple. The environment in which traffic officers actually operate is an isolated environment, and they very rarely have more than two parties that are party to a corrupt activity. Now, last week, 2 officers were observed by an investigator from Tshwane Metro soliciting and taking bribes, and he then subsequently arrested these 2 officers. And the news reported that these 2 officers will face internal disciplinary charges and not criminal charges. Now, we have a problem with that, and I'll tell you why. Okay. Firstly, we have the Prevention and Combating of Corrupt Activities Act, which imposes very harsh sentences for people found guilty of corruption.
Yeah.
If we hope to have any effect whatsoever on this rampant corruption, we need to start using that act. Having internal disciplinary hearings, firing those staff and letting them go to another metro or to another traffic department and carry on and pick up where they left off just doesn't make any sense. But that is essentially what's happening these days.
Is this a general scenario in South Africa that quite often the cases are made but they never follow through, and the perpetrators, the police in this case, or the road police in this case, not brought to book?
Absolutely. As I said, they might lose their job, but in losing their job, that doesn't really mean anything, because they just go and pick up where they left off with another traffic authority. And that is a big problem. We also need to remember that there are certain motorists out there who feel that it's okay just to pull out a bribe straight away the second that a traffic cop pulls them over. And, you know, it doesn't matter what your view is. I'm going to ask everybody to think a little bit on this score. If you feel that you haven't done anything wrong, or whatever you've done is minor, etc., and you pay a traffic cop a bribe, I think you need to bear in mind that there's a person who has consumed large amounts of alcohol who feels exactly the same way.
Yeah.
And that person also pays a bribe, and they could be driving towards your family. So if you want to see corruption diminish in South Africa, learn to say no to corrupt traffic cops. Take that fine and deal with it. But the big problem is that, unfortunately, our legislators seem to enable laws or enact laws that actually encourage corruption. It was recently revealed that the Ekurhuleni Metro Police Department is now actually enforcing Section 57 of the Criminal Procedure Act, which imposes a criminal record on anybody who pays a handwritten fine that is issued to them by a traffic officer if they go and they pay that Section 56 summons. Now, it's quite ridiculous that any of us would expect somebody not to pay a bribe if they can incur a criminal record for example, not knowing where their warning triangle is in their motor vehicle, okay, as opposed to paying a bribe to a cop and not incurring a criminal record. We need to get realistic about this, and unfortunately we need assistance of the legislature in order to bring these changes about.
Tell us about the public. You said earlier that, the South African public are often guilty. How big are the numbers? Do we have a culture where we are happy to pay bribes and then complain about corruption afterwards?
Absolutely. There's no doubt whatsoever in my mind. Unfortunately, a lot of the research that's been done about this is done around this is anecdotal. And I'll tell you why. Because they go out and ask people, have you paid a Metro cop a bribe? And if so, how much did you pay them and where did you pay them? Well, how many people do you know who are actually prepared to actively admit to committing a crime?
Moving on, Transport Minister Dipuo Peters retained her position after the cabinet announcement last weekend. A decision that you welcome. Is she making a difference?
Well, of all the ministers of transport that we've had of late, Dipuo Peters has achieved much more than anybody else. And I say that in respect to her actually reining in the people in the Department of Transport. So we need consistency, we need continuity. So we are delighted to see that she stayed on.
Then the introduction of e-tolls in KwaZulu-Natal, we've seen what kind of backlash we've had here in Gauteng. What's your take on that?
Well, firstly, I think we need to actually bring that into perspective and rein it in. What they are talking about is implementing e-tag lanes on the existing toll roads in KwaZulu-Natal.
Yeah.
Now, that would be the kind of thing that is practiced at Zambezi Drive, Stormful Drive, etc., which we've had in Gauteng for donkey's years, if not decades. Okay, so an e-tag lane, fine. Open road tolling is unique to Johannesburg, Ekurhuleni and Tshwane, unfortunately.
Before I let you go, Howard, I want you to have a look at the carnage counter quickly and just tell us the methodology and then what the numbers are saying.
Well, it's very simple. This works off an algorithm that goes and calculates our annualized figures and then brings them down to figures per second. And we are currently looking at 420,216 crashes this year alone from January. In South Africa. In South Africa.
That's an unbelievable number.
We're looking at 6,902 fatalities. We are looking at 62,885 people injured. And we are looking at paralyzed people coming out at nearly 3,834
That's for the first 5-6 months of the year. And then the cost that you see there to the nation, that's 128 billion rand that it's costing us on the road. That's 2 arms deals right there in the first 5 months of the year. That is scary stuff, really, if you look at it in that sort of context. Howard, thank you, though, for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Eben.
Howard Dembosky is the chairman of the Justice Project South Africa. He pops in periodically to give us a little heads up as to where we are on our roads and how things are looking on South Africa's roads. Keep it safe out there. Looking at our top story now, making headlines on our platforms here at SABC. Test results from the water that's caused widespread diarrhea in the northwest town of Bloemhof are expected today. National government has stepped in to resolve the crisis, and Water and Sanitation Minister Nomvulo Mokonyane visited the area at the weekend.
The newly appointed Water and Sanitation Minister travelled to Bloemhof, where 3 children have perished in the past week. The water supply has been contaminated by raw sewage. Several schools have closed and thousands have taken ill. Symptoms, remarkably similar to cholera, include diarrhea and vomiting.
We have brought in the Sidibeng water board from the National Department. We've got different units from the Department of Water Affairs that are going to come in and reinforce the capacity of the local municipality together with the district on a long-term intervention.
The Mogoreji family has lost a child. They blame government.
I'm hurting after I lost my baby due to the outbreak. We did not know that the water was contaminated.
Residents too weighed in, blaming inefficient local government.
We saw that the municipality is giving us dirty water and it doesn't assist us at all. The municipality doesn't even assist the community.
A special task team is advising the minister.
Yeah, you're back with us. Today we celebrate World Cancer Survivors Day, a day when thousands of people in hundreds of communities around the world hold celebrations to honour cancer survivors and celebrate life. It is a celebration for those who've survived, an inspiration for those recently diagnosed, and a gathering of support for families and an outreach to communities out there. On that note, we are joined by former Springbok swimmer Sean Harris, who is a cancer survivor. Sean was diagnosed with cancer in 2011 and today is in complete remission after beating cancer only 2 years ago. He's been back in the pool in training for the 2016 Olympics. Sean, good morning and thanks for joining us, mate.
Good morning, Eben. Thank you for having me on the show. And, listeners out there, thank you.
Fantastic story. I want to start with the inspiration first. You know, a lot of people, the C word they call it, it's a big word, but there's life after being diagnosed with cancer. Am I right?
You're definitely right, Eben. You know, it's a second chance in life, and I'm a living example. I'm here today, so yeah, definitely life after cancer.
Tell us your story a little bit. Take us back to the day when you were diagnosed. How did it feel? As many describe it, do you feel that depression and that sort of death sentence hanging over you?
You know, it's funny you mentioned the word death sentence. You know, the first thing that goes through my mind was 2 days before the doctors came to me and they diagnosed me with a germ cell tumour. Yeah. Seminoma being testicular cancer. Yeah. My mind was playing a lot of games, you know. Then at that stage, I was thinking to myself, you know, what's going to happen? Am I going to make this or not, you know? But when the doctors gave me the news that it was a germ cell tumour, and there's hope, I said, right, let's do this. Let's fight this thing, you know. And then that's exactly what I did.
We've got some pictures of you in the pool wearing a South African flag, but tell me, it must have been worlds apart. And how do people treat you? Do people treat you differently when they discover that you either have cancer or you're a cancer survivor? Does the conversation change?
I think a lot of people have respect for me in that sense because, you know, I have beaten cancer. And I think a lot of people look up to me, you know, and saying, yes, you know, this guy's got the fighting spirit, and cancer can be beaten. So, yeah, no, definitely.
As a professional, let's start with your career before I go there and the effects. Just tell us about your career, the highlights of it, and how, well, up to the time when you were diagnosed, really.
Look, the main achievement was All African Games. We won that gold medal in Algeria. And I think looking back onto that, you know, I've come a long way. And, yeah, I mean, for me personally, you know, the gold medal meant so much. But this is a different medal, you know. This cancer surviving day that we're celebrating in particular, you know, it's definitely for me, it's so amazing just to actually overcome that, you know, the cancer, the fighting and moving forward.
And now as a professional, it must have been devastating news, must have been a huge setback. How do you mentally overcome that and how does it change your training and your outlook?
Look, I mean, I was diagnosed with cancer and I was thinking to myself I would still train and still go to work and live a normal life. But the chemotherapy took a lot out of me. And at that stage, I had to pull back and obviously fight the cancer and focus more on the cancer to beat this cancer thing. You know? Yeah. But I was fit. I mean, I was healthy, and I got diagnosed with cancer. But it does take a lot out of you, you know. So I mean, I had to step back, and I couldn't train or work at that stage.
How long were you out?
I was out about for 2 years, about a year and a half, I would say. Yeah, and the chemotherapy was 9 months altogether. Yeah. And but the operations after that, the operation we did it in Pretoria. My doctor in Pretoria did the operation, and it's quite intense. 6 hours, you know, and they removed more than a tennis ball with a tumor of 2.5 centimeters. Wow. And 13 lymph nodes. So, and 3 of those lymph nodes they were dead cancer cells. So it was destined that I shouldn't have been here today. So.
Well, you're here and you're a beacon of light to many out there who find themselves maybe a little bit depressed and thinking that they might have problems. Well, here we go. Now, I want to ask you about the Olympics 2016. You're only just recently back in the pool, am I right?
That's right, yes. I started training in December, where I qualified for nationals. That was held from the 7th to the 14th, I think it was, in April. And I did very well. I came 4th at nationals with a time of 22.87 in the 50 freestyle, which amazing. I mean that's really amazing for me. With only 5 months of training, you know. So I'm definitely I want to go to the Olympics.
Your Twitter page, just tell people how they can interact with you and what's happening on here, and you know, a National Cancer Survivor Day today, how people can get involved with it and interact with it.
Yeah, please. I would like the public to get more involved. You can get me on my Twitter handle at Sean. It's all capital letters, Sean_Harris_, and ask me questions. You're more than welcome to. I can interact with the public.
And if you had a message, if somebody out there has cancer today, or have been diagnosed in the last week or so, what's your message to those who are out there who are now recently discovered they've got cancer of any kind? It must be a complete mind shift. What's your message to them?
Take it one day at a time. You know, yes, you are diagnosed with a deadly disease, but there is hope and there is life after cancer. But like I said, take it one day at a time. One day at a time, and we look forward to seeing you at the 2016 Olympics. Hopefully with some sort of medal, Sean, because I mean, you know, you've shown that you're good enough to do that, and that's obviously what's on your mind, I would think. No, look, I mean, I need to qualify in April 2016 for Olympics. And however, there is a few obstacles that we still need to overcome, sponsorships, etc. I've got a sponsorship supplement at this stage, but there is a few obstacles, namely sponsorships, you know, that we need to overcome. But I will qualify, and I will be there. You will see me in 2016. Fantastic. Your story is a fantastic story. Today, of course, World Cancer Survivor Day, and one of the poster men, not a boy, poster men for cancer survivors here in South Africa. He's Sean Harris, former, Springbok swimmer. You're never a former Springbok swimmer. Never former Springbok swimmer. You're a current Springbok and a man who will be representing us, hopefully, at the Olympics in 2016 when we go to Rio. Hopefully, we'll see him on a podium there somewhere. Thanks for joining us, Sean. Thank you very much for having me. Brilliant. Thank you. Now, let's take a final look at, what you are talking about on social media. At SABC Newsroom, that is where you send your contributions to. Now, Malusi Nguni says, at Lonman, people are hungry and are prepared to die for their demand. Are the bosses prepared to take responsibility? What about the bosses that are leading the unions, my friend? Some of them are living well. Judas the Priest says, at SA Labour News, AMCU #platinum strikes. The AMCU leaders need to end up before a court for all the violence and damage they have caused. Then Mr. President says, dear AMCU, your strike needs to intensify and also spread over to the cold fields. Act smart because you have our full support. Under the name Mr. President. That is not our president. Then African. Simply an Ape says, I support the AMCU mine workers strike. It's high time miners flex their muscle and show they are the backbone of this economy. Living wage, he says. I'm an African. Chief Tabo says, Amplat says, legally they could fire the striking workers. You can't strike for 4 months. AMCU has some soul searching to do. SABC News will keep you updated on that story. Of course, some crucial developments in that story today, a little bit later today, and we'll keep you updated on our platform as to how that breaks and develops. Newsroom is broadcast live from our studios in Auckland Park in Johannesburg between 9 and 10 a.m. every weekday morning. The show repeats at 2 o'clock in the afternoon with a rebroadcast then at 5 a.m. the following morning. We also stream live on YouTube at that time with the show, the whole show that is available on demand on our YouTube channel all of the time as well. This is SABC News. You have been watching Newsroom. We love it in the morning.